Crime Report, the Law&Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenney Baden. We have been covering this week, and we will cover all this week, the horrible crimes committed by one Joseph DeAngelo. He was known as the Golden State Killer. He could also be the Golden State Rapist. More than 50 rapes, more than 13 murders, we think, 150 other burglaries and other crimes. It's just horrendous. Yesterday, some of the victims spoke, and one of the victims talked about her mom, okay? Her mom's name was Debbie Strauss. This is Sandy James telling her mom's story about her link with the Golden State Killer.
On October 29th, 1977, our horror movie became reality. Before this day, JJD, the evil monster, had stalked my sister for weeks, if not months. I believe he entered her first home, where he stole a couple items, increasing an already fearful time. My sister and her husband, newly married, had just bought a new house and moved into their new home, the first in their cul-de-sac. This evil monster entered their home while they were away, leaving him several options for re-entering later. In the dark of the night, like the pathetic creep he is, JJD invaded my sister and her husband's home while they slept, blinding them with his flashlight and yelling at them. After bounding them, placing dishes on my brother-in-law's back, and moving my sister to another room, my sister was raped repeatedly, terrorized, and threatened for hours, 4 hours. At times, DeAngelo presented himself as the tough, evil monster, while in an instant, cowering, running through her home, yelling to his mommy he was sorry, and why was she, mommy, making him do this? DeAngelo ate, drank, and stole items, including Debbie's wedding ring and birthstone ring given to her by our parents. A year after the brutal attack, Debbie began getting phone calls with heavy breathing and evil threats.
That was the sister of one of the victims, the sister of Debbie Strauss, telling the story. Well, this is so much to handle. I need my best guest to handle it and discuss it with you, and we have him here today. I'd like to introduce you to, obviously, Judge Ashley Willcott. You know her well, a trial judge from Georgia, deals with children's rights and victims' rights. Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Linda. Great to see you.
And nice seeing you. And of course, the famous Ecleynne Mercy. I have my Georgia contingent always right on point. So let me start with you, Ecleynne. Why do serial killers take trophies like wedding rings? Is it about control? Is it about theft? Tell me.
They're narcissistic. They're narcissistic by nature. They're narcissistic by nature, and they want trophies. They did. They felt that they did a good job. They did a good deed. They conquered what they wanted to conquer. They satisfied a scratch. It is all about them. You know, they don't see the victims. They don't see the victims' families. They just see what they want, and it's sad.
Ecleynne, you know what?
These are not regular individuals. These are menaces to society.
Ecleynne, you just hit the nail on the head, because we are now going to see the victims and the victims' families, because there's a court hearing going on in California. And before we talk to Judge Ashley, we're going to go into that court hearing and listen to those victims.
Detailing my journey after my assault. I tried to escape my fear with alcohol, but medicating myself did not work. However, that experience brought me to finding the Lord, so it was worth it. He performed a miracle and relieved me of my addiction. I may have been one of your victims, DeAngelo, but you know what? Now I'm a survivor thriver, and I've had a great life. I put my fears aside. I finished my nursing degree at Cal State the same year of your attack. And then I spent 30 years in the Air Force, achieving the rank of colonel. Yes, evil one, I turned my pain into power and my mess into a message by facilitating groups of women that had been sexually assaulted and volunteering at our Rape Crisis Center. All very worthwhile activities. Who knows, though, what I might have accomplished had my life not had been interrupted by your vicious attack. I have a loving husband of 26 years and 2 amazing, successful sons. So you didn't destroy my life. In fact, your cowardly, cruel, and sick behavior enabled me to meet so many wonderful folks, other victims, their families, investigators, detectives, TV personalities, etc. And my life has been so enriched by their friendship, and my life is so much more meaningful now because of it. If it wasn't for the trauma I endured, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I am proud of what I have accomplished. I am blessed beyond words. I see your eyes are closing. Yes, my wounds have been healed, but my scars remain. Hearing a helicopter overhead, seeing a ski mask, and hearing someone yell or say, "Shut up," will forever cause me anxiety. My comfort at those times is remembering that you are finally going to prison and will remain there until you die. Oh, and by the way, D'Angelo, do you remember the roast you had cooking in the oven the day you were arrested? Well, too bad you didn't get to enjoy it, because many of your victims will be enjoying a delicious roast every 24 April in remembrance of your capture, unless there is a divine intervention. And by the way, I want you to know that I was just sick to my stomach listening to the graphic details of your assaults during the hearing. Your language, your behavior were just deplorable. Have you no mercy? Have you no remorse? Not only does my heart go out to all of the women you raped and the dear souls you so viciously murdered, but also to your former wife, your children, your grandchildren. They don't deserve to live a life full of shame due to your despicable actions. D'Angelo, they too are your victims. Think about it, D'Angelo. They too are your victims. Well, you know, a quarter of me, being a Christian, I want to say to you, may God have mercy on your soul. But then there's another 3/4 of me that just want to tell you, buddy, to rot in hell. Well, I want to thank all of my supporters that are here today. I want to thank everyone that's worked so hard on getting us all here. And I'm just blessed to have supporters at home, supporters here. And I also want to especially thank a friend that's accompanying me today. And that friend is Bonnie. Take your mask off. If Bonnie were able to speak, Joe, she would want you to know that as just a teenager 50 years ago, she broke her engagement to you when she realized that you would become manipulative and abusive. When you thought you could kidnap her and force her to marry you, even a gun pointed at her face could not make her choose you. When she saw who you really were, she was done with you. I can see that I Hate You, Bonnie was a result of your frustration because you lost control over her. But she bears none of that responsibility for your violent choices. And we consider her one of us, the sister survivors of your malicious attacks. When you are willed away to begin your sentence, you'll return in Bonnie's life to that forgotten and insignificant place, gone from her life forever. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. My name understanding is we're going to go forward with San Joaquin County. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. It'll be San Joaquin County, specifically Jane Doe number 39 and Jane Doe number 17, and the representatives from San Joaquin County District Attorney's Office will be here.
Very good. Thank you.
I just went, oh, wow, Judge Ashley Willcott. Oh, wow, when she said Bonnie and then said this was the first woman he was engaged to. It's Bonnie Cobell. I believe he was engaged in 1970, according to my notes. She broke off the engagement, and the investigators somehow think that maybe this was a motivator for the beginning of the crimes, because just as this victim just said, I hate you, Bonnie, was one of the things he said to one of the victims who was being assaulted. Judge, your reaction?
Yeah, first of all, what a strong, amazing survivor she was. Number two, on Bonnie, listen, not only did he say that to one of the women he later attacked, but look at the level of violence and threats he made against Bonnie, who broke off the engagement. And that's indicative of all his future behaviors and crimes.
And also, this victim here had her 3-year-old son. It was Carson Sandler, 3-year-old son. She was snuggling with her 3-year-old son when he broke into the house, burglarized it, and assaulted her years ago. I mean, what kind of person is a serial killer? What kind of person looks to assault somebody who's hugging a child? Judge.
I can't ever describe any of these criminals' behaviors and understand why. We will never understand why, other than he is through and through evil. He's got a soul that has no compassion, has no empathy, has no sympathy. He didn't care. He didn't care who she was with or what she was doing. It didn't matter to him. It was a 3-year-old. In other cases, there were many attacked who had children, 7 years old. That didn't make a difference to him because he had no compassion. He didn't care. He was going to do all of the horrific, heinous things he chose to do to individuals, regardless of who else was present, including a 3-year-old.
Ecleynne Mercer, I'd like to bring you into this because I started by asking our producer, Brianna, what was the year that assault happened, okay? And it turns out it's 1976. Now, 1976, D'Angelo was a police officer. He actually was a police officer for 2 different towns, one Exeter and one Auburn. He worked, he was actually terminated or left, I guess, is more the better thing to say, in 1976 from Exeter. And then, well, you know what, Ecleynne, we're going to have to continue that conversation because there's more happening in court, and we want to listen to the victims because this is their day.
He forced oral copulation. He stole the few precious pieces of jewelry that I owned, which were gold rings given to me by my brother and my parents to commemorate my graduation from college the year before. I was the first girl in my family to graduate from college, and so those pieces were important to me. He ate from my refrigerator and he drank 2 beers while I lay bound and blindfolded, unclothed and freezing on the hardwood floor in front of an open door in the cold March night. He ransacked our home, and in between he tormented me with threats of death for me and my loved one should I make a sound or resist in any way. The aftermath of this attack has been with me for 42 years. That's a very long life sentence for somebody who had done nothing to deserve such hatred and violence and desecration of my body. To illustrate the lasting impact of this event, I have 3 clean sheets of paper here. All 3, if they represent lives, have unlimited potential in this world. These paper lives might serve to hold the written formula of a life-saving scientific breakthrough a beautiful poem, a soul-moving watercolor. Certainly they would carry words of love and comfort and encouragement and shared memories to their families, both the younger and the older generations. This life, paper number 1, was never touched by Joe DeAngelo. To this day, it remains clean and pristine and able to sweep itself clean of all of its previous endeavors and start new ones if it chooses. It served the world to its fullest capacity and still has much to give. This life, no, it's okay. Paper number 2 was murdered by Joe DeAngelo. It's a life violently taken by him while satisfying his perverted, sadistic urges.
Gay hard worker survivor. We need to take a quick break so we can come right back and you can listen to more of her and other survivors. Stay tuned. The victims of the Golden State Killer are in court. They've waited over 40 years to give their statements to the court, tell their stories. They're doing it right now. Ms. Hardwick is telling her story with her husband standing beside her. Let's listen.
Victim blaming attitudes, the perpetration of rape myths, not just back in the 1970s, but today as well. Here are some comments made by elected officials in our country in just the past few years. Clayton Williams of Texas, rape is kind of like the weather. If it's inevitable, relax and enjoy it. Todd Aiken of Missouri, if it's a legitimate rape, is there a legitimate rape? The female body has ways to shut that thing down. Rick Santorum, US Senator, former US Senator, and candidate for president. Rape victims should make the best of a bad situation. Richard Murdoch of Indiana. Even when life begins in that horrible situation of rape, that's something God intended, not the attacker. The blame's not placed on the attacker. Jody Lobenberg of Texas. In the emergency room, they have what's called rape kits, where a woman can get cleaned out. Lawrence Lockman of Maine. If a woman has the right to an abortion, why shouldn't a man be free to use his superior strength to force himself on a woman? At least the rapist's pursuit of sexual freedom doesn't, in most cases, result in anyone's death. These are widely published and circulated quotations, and you can see these individuals saying these words on YouTube if you just Google them. Expressions of ignorance such as these are so damaging to rape victims like me, and they serve to dismiss rape as some kind of boys will be boys transgression. Even as I was writing my statement, our present administration, through Betsy DeVos, has enacted into law changes to the Title IX protections for students K through 12 and college campuses that force victims of sexual assault to face their attacker and be cross-examined, which will most likely result in fewer rape victims being willing to report these crimes because they don't want to be traumatized a second time. The trusted advisor that's allowed to question these students can be, for example, the attacker's disgruntled parent. None of the new procedures are trauma-informed in any way. Victims are guaranteed that they may change classes or dorms to avoid their attacker, but again, these are victims, not the accused, being forced to make adaptations. What if this was your college or high school student? This is just where we are in 2020. We haven't come a long way. Interestingly, my personal experience has been that if I describe our attack as armed robbery, bound and held at gunpoint, people are usually supportive. They're so glad you weren't killed. They're understanding that they would have been also lucky to survive if they had been held at gunpoint and robbed. They don't ask, why didn't you fight back and stop the robber and save your money? Because they would have followed directions to save themselves too. But when it's rape at gunpoint, often the response is, I never would have let that happen. Really? There wasn't anything you could do? Just recently, someone asked me, how did you come to know this person? Which feels like they must think I have been engaging in some kind of risky behavior to bring this on myself. Where were you? What were you doing? What were you wearing when this happened? Are still so commonly asked. Then there's my personal favorite. Well, at least you weren't hurt. There are also those who just don't believe what happened really occurred, or that I must be mistaken. And you can see the doubt in their eyes. I don't know why that is, but it does happen. And my conclusion is that it's just plain too disturbing for their mind to have to believe the terror and the truth of it. Because then, if it could happen to me, it could happen to them. It could happen to anyone. Besides the sociological impacts that contributed to my PTSD, there's the very real physiological and psychological changes brought about by the trauma of Joe DeAngelo's attacks. There are the feelings of needing to always be hyper alert, nightmares, sleeplessness, flashbacks, social anxiety, inability to be or stay alone. Imagine not being able to enjoy a quiet moment by yourself. I became the Black Hawk helicopter of all parents. I remember an incident 2 decades after my attack where I thought I was fully recovered. My husband and 4 children were in Monterey on vacation, but I had returned to attend a mandatory evening class for my credentialing program. I was actually looking forward to some personal time alone. I had purchased Chinese takeout and I was ready for a well-earned quiet evening in our home. But as I sat down on the couch in my PJs to enjoy my food and watch a movie, my eyes strayed to the kitchen counter where there was a roll of duct tape sitting. And there were measured lengths set out ready for use. And my triggered response to this was the certainty in my mind that there was someone in the house ready to bind me with these tapes. I didn't know where they'd come from, and I ran to my car in terror in my PJs, and I fled to my dad's house, shaking, trembling, and where I spent the night in my father's care in my childhood bed, while my takeout was left to spoil on our family room table where I left it. And this was 2 decades later. As it would turn out, I would later learn that while I had left earlier on vacation with 3 of our kids, my husband had come along a few hours later, staying to coach a junior basketball league for one of our kids. Not yet having uniforms, he had used the duct tape to fashion numbers for their t-shirts. And what I had seen were the remnants of his efforts. But for me, returning to attend my class, it was the kind of stupid, brain-triggering event that could still plague me so many years later. There are chemical changes in the brain that can damage the hippocampus. The neural and endocrine systems are affected. The body has higher levels of cortisol, adrenaline rushes. Cortisol has widespread action, and its dysregulation affects other neural systems, leading to my inappropriate fear reactions and persistent mild depression. And that can sometimes escalate. I still don't know how much my immune system has ultimately been damaged. These things don't ever really go away. Just when you think you're okay, a triggering event can occur and you find yourself right back in the middle of a panic attack or an unreasonably aggressive response to something relatively minor, or a series of unexplained and unrelenting nightmares. PTSD, a rewiring of my central nervous system, as my psychiatrist described it, contributed to a lot of these creases and wrinkles in my life. Other things, such as trust issues, body image issues, lost opportunities that I just didn't have the energy to pursue any longer, such as law school or graduate work, are also a part of my wrinkled life. I left my career because I could no longer cope with the stress and anxiety of traveling and being exposed to so many strangers on a daily basis in order to do my job. I stayed home for 10 years, where I felt safer. Finally, at the age of 42, I entered a teacher credentialing program and became an elementary school teacher. At least I wasn't afraid of children. I used all my energy to keep my dream of marriage and family strong, and I built the best second career I could for 21 years before retiring. But it shouldn't have been this hard. I shouldn't have had to make constant adaptations to compensate for the wrinkles and the creases on my life's page. My choices should not have been impacted by this devastating event in my life. It's taken all my energy to make this page function and achieve.
Ecleynne Mercy, I have so much here. I'm not going to get back to the police issue right now. Gay Hardwick just made this a political statement, talking about and quoting different politicians about their views about women getting raped. I am just in awe of her. Tell me your reaction, please.
I was rendered speechless. It's so emotionally charged. First, you have D'Angelo actually paying attention. During sentencing, especially with serial killers, they sometimes will do certain terrible things like disregard the victim and disregard their victim statements. He is paying attention, and she is making him pay attention, as well as making the world pay attention to how rape victims are being treated. And how she just made it political, like I was rendered speechless. I had to put my stuff down because she did it so seamlessly. She not only told her story, but told the stories of a lot of rape victims in which they're not able to explain to people that, yes, although I didn't die, it might as well have been because my life is no longer my life. This man kind of took something away from me. And she is making it clear, and she is making it relevant, and she is doing an excellent job.
You are so right, Ecleynne. But you know what, Ecleynne? We're going to all contemplate this right now. We're going to take a quick break and think about what Gay Hardwick said about the Golden State Killer and how women are treated when they are sexually assaulted. Gay Hardwick is bringing it. She is in court. She's still giving her victim impact statement. Let's listen to her.
To protect and defend him, that he has betrayed and disgraced. I have one final paper to share with you. This one was once a clean, crisp, blank page full of possibilities that might have benefited the world. But it's today a toxic, steaming, evil mass of human waste, best kept sealed tightly. And there's no excuse for this. So I get that he may have been an abused child, that he experienced sad things in his life, that he had to move around a lot, that his fiance jilted him, but a lot of people go through bad times and they don't decide to be serial rapists and murderers. I and many others like me were traumatized within an inch of our lives, and we did not decide to become serial rapists and murderers. For 2 years now, I've witnessed D'Angelo devolve, dissolve, and decompose through his sheer will into this seemingly puny coward before us today. During this time, he's somehow been allowed to liquidate his home and his personal assets and transfer them to his family. It's my view that instead, all of those assets should have been impounded by the state of California to defray the costs of his legal proceedings and his incarceration. He has bargained for and obtained the removal of the death penalty, though if there was ever anyone more deserving of death, I can't imagine who. I'm certain that there is method in his madness and that his plan is to weaken himself in order to be assigned his life without parole sentence in some prison nursing home for old murdering psychopaths, where he thinks he will be treated more like a patient than an inmate. It is my fervent prayer that the court and the Department of Corrections will see through his ruse and realize that he has been treated more than fairly. He deserves the fullest, longest sentencing that this court can muster, along with the recommendation that he be located as far away from his victims as possible. My wish would be that he serve his death in prison sentence within the cold walls of Pelican Bay, as far away as possible, because all of us survivors deserve the peace of knowing that D'Angelo is gone for good. We survivors can continue to try and smooth out the wrinkles in our lives. And as my fellow survivor Trish quoted recently, try to make the rest of our lives the best of our lives. We deserve that opportunity. This is opportunity that was turned into ugly choices. And when I was making this paper sculpture and I ran it through my paper shredder, doing that to Joe's life felt pretty good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sir.
You know, Ecleynne Mercier, I was going to castigate the judge for not wearing his mask, and he put it back on, but I think he wanted us to see his face and the way the attorneys are sitting away from their client. This woman was unbelievable. Survivor hard work, unbelievable. She brought it. She talked about what we were going to talk about. This man was a police officer and used his police uniform and his tactical unit to commit this crime. And then she castigated everybody. Tell me what you come away with from this.
Oh my God, from top to bottom, shots were fired. She blazed every point of contact and she did it with precision. She did it with the strength. I could not even imagine being in front of my rapist and not only cutting him to the core, but cutting everybody around him, including the prosecution, including the police department. It was beautifully done. I pray she can get an honorary legal degree. She deserves one. If she's running for anything, I will be supporting her. She did it with such beauty and grace. This woman deserves a medal. She went and she dove into D'Angelo being a police officer, showing that it was the police station. It was that type of position that groomed, that made him be able to thrive. He learned, and then it opened up the door of why certain people want to be police officers. Maybe that they have a precondition, maybe that they're susceptible to wanting to overpower people, to wanting to cause pain. And she opened the door. I am in awe. I am in awe.
Judge Ashley Willcott, I mean, really, everything Ecleynne said, everything Ms. Hardwick said. In 1978, he was a police officer with the Auburn Police Department. He was fired about a year later because he was shoplifting, a spray, dog repellent, and a hammer. Those seem like opportunity of weapons that he was going to be using in his assaults and his crimes. Do you think that someone has to go back and look at this and see what happened and if anybody knew anything? Because to me, this sounds very strange.
I think that they will, and I think that they should, because all of us as a system, you have to look backwards when you see a criminal such as this who's committed so many different heinous crimes, and you have to look back and say, was there a missed opportunity? When a police officer shoplifts, first and foremost, right, Linda, don't you think that should give you a heads up to say, wait a minute, we have a problem, because an officer of the law shoplifting, even if they don't commit more egregious crimes, is doing something they shouldn't be doing that's against the law. Mayhaps they should never be a police officer anywhere else again, right? And so it could have been a predictor that maybe this was not the kind of person that should be allowed to be a police officer. Linda, I have to take this opportunity to say one other thing. Lady Justice has a blindfold for a reason, and it means that justice should be administered impartially without regard to wealth or status or any other thing. And for her to say as a victim they were treated differently depending on the jurisdiction where they are is a huge problem that continues to exist today.
Gay Hardwick, you should be running a victims witness program and teaching everybody in the United States. You know what? We're going to contemplate everything she said. We're going to take a quick break here in the Law&Crime Network, and then we'll be back to the sentencing hearing of the Golden State Killer and rapist. One of the rape victims, Gay Hardwick, finished her statement. Her husband is now giving his victim impact statement to that courtroom and to Joseph DeAngelo. Listen, because he wants an eye for an eye.
I would like Mr. DeAngelo to go to sleep at night, not knowing whether he was going to have a good night, meaning no attacker, or a bad night, attackers. It is imperative for justice to be achieved, and these attacks continue for the rest of his life, which statistically would probably be no more than 10 to 15 years because of his life expectancy. That's far less than the 40 plus years that the victims have suffered terror. Like my wife has suffered with this for going on 42 years now. This is what I realize. This is a wish list, and I know it can't happen, but again, this is a fantasy sentence. So I say this one thing to future inmates of Joe DeAngelo. If you are listening, please remember what I have said. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe the next county to be heard is Alameda.
We have a moment, Your Honor.
Certainly.
They're setting up the next county of victims to be heard in this courtroom in the sentencing hearing, sentencing impact statements of the Golden State Killer, Golden State Rapist. But that gives me a chance really quickly. Judge Ashley Willcott, that was Robert Hardwick. We just heard his wife so incredibly eloquent, touching every base. He actually went with the basis of, hey, you are a rapist and a killer, and you have terrorized my wife for 42 years, and I want you to feel some of the same in prison. And he implored inmates, if they're listening, do what you need to do. What say you, Judge?
Victim, because honestly, who couldn't be a victim of these types of crimes and feel that way, which is, I hope it happens to you too. So I think he's angry, and I think his wife was eloquent, and he took the opportunity to say, That's all well and good. I hope you suffer the same fate.
And Judge, in the prison case system, there is a sort of, shall we say, a certain level that if you are a rapist and you hurt women and children, you are at the bottom of the rung of the prison rape system. So what he says does have some effect, doesn't it? Because they are going to have to watch him because he is going to be a target of other prisoners.
Oh, I would agree he's going to be a target, and I do think it could have an effect. And just keep in mind, all of these cases, even if he didn't rape any of the young children, a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, he tied them up. He committed crimes against them. He made them witness what he did to their mothers. So I do think prisoners are not going to like that.
And Ecleynne Mercy, we won't have much time because as we're going to go right to the victims, but I just want one reaction from you. Here, the Hardwicks seemed to indicate they were not taken seriously because it was the wife was raped. And after all, according to one politician, she didn't die, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Isn't it true? You think that's the case? Do you think that this crime was not solved? People weren't talking to each other when they had size 9 footprints. They had a lot of an issue that he used tactical gear to to help with his crimes. You think it wasn't taken seriously because it involved just rapes?
Yeah, especially during the time, this was even before Anita Hill. So they didn't even, sexual harassment even wasn't a thing at the time. And then we have this whole Brothers in Blue, which protects law enforcement. And it's like, it's a breeding ground for D'Angelo. It was like he was protected. Then there was, the blatant misogyny from up to down. And then this was before rape shield laws. So you could only imagine how these rape victims were questioned during that time. So she had to take a lot. And then she took it with grace. But understand that her husband also, because you can tell that they were in a loving relationship, her husband also felt like D'Angelo was like a shadow in their marriage because she was constantly trying to heal from it. Can you imagine if you didn't have a husband who can understand that? There are women who have these types of stories and can't even tell their spouse. So Ms. Hardwick and Mr. Hardwick, my hat goes off to you. They just did an excellent job, and it's sad that this is how it had to come out.
Okay, thank you, Ecleynne. You know what? I believe we're going to take another quick break because no, I'm sorry. I am sorry. We're not going to take another quick break. We are waiting for the Alameda victims to be set up. There were at least 7 counties here of victims here. Ecleynne Mercy, Sacramento, Santa Barbara, Orange, Alameda, Ventura, Tulane, Contra Costa. And we're going by the crimes as they occurred. So we just heard from 1978. I assume we're going to continue on into the 1980s. Now, have you ever heard, Judge Ashley Willcott, any impact statements like this? I know I haven't, and I have been blown away.
No, I haven't. And we talked about yesterday some with Aaron Keller that different states have different rules around victim impact statements, but victims are generally always allowed to present an impact statement. These statements are so much more detailed and vengeful and anger-filled, and truly, I appreciate these victims are being allowed to say how they feel, and for the court to determine this is not only impact on these individuals, but also on the society caused by this horrific man over a very long period of time, can make the decisions this court is tasked with on how long he will be in jail.
Well, let me just summarize what's happened so far in the sentencing hearing we had yesterday. We have today of the Golden State Killer. The victims, mostly the rapes, are being the rape victims are just pouring their hearts out to this judge, to this court, telling us their stories. It is heart-wrenching. It is incredible. It also has become quite clear there were missed opportunities in capturing the Golden State Killer, as he's become to be known, for his over 150 uncharged crimes here that we have, burglaries, and all 13 rapes he's pled guilty to, or 13 murders and rapes he's pled guilty to, and also a forceful kidnappings. We have to take a quick break now here at the Law&Crime Network. Please stay with us. We will be right back.